Welcome back to Virteva's Let's Talk podcast, the show that analyzes the newest technologies in Microsoft Cloud and how to manage those technologies to help your business teams be successful. It's episode 18. It's episode 18, Holly Peterson. That's crazy. I feel like we just started these not that long ago and already at 18. So second podcast of the year. For those of you that are regular listeners and are wondering, where did they go? They've been gone for more than a month. Well, I had some work travel. I also had a vacation at the beginning of February. If you've been keeping up on the YouTube channel, you've seen that I've been also posting more shorts like I talked about on the last podcast. But yes, we are back. It's February 27th right now. But for those lucky listeners and viewers, you will likely see this pop up on a day that will not exist next year because we are living in a leap year. So yeah, likely this will go up on the 29th. We are back. And today, before we get into the content, again, I just wanted to thank all of our listeners, both on the audio-only podcast and our YouTube subscribers. We have crossed 1,100 audio listens in less than, let's say, 7 or 8 months, which is awesome. In the YouTube content, we put the channel up there. I had an MBR that I was at last week in Minneapolis, and we were talking about that content. And we launched the channel in September of 2022. And we basically put 2 videos up on it, and we split those videos up. Our content partner split it up into 10 different videos per each video. So we had 20 videos on the channels, and we got about 1,000 views on it. And then the channel didn't get a whole lot of attention until we started doing the Let's Talk podcast. And since then, we've gotten about 3,500 additional views. So altogether, with the audio-only podcast and the YouTube stuff, we're floating around like 5,000 listens or views right now, which is really cool.
That's great.
Never done the YouTube thing before, so I'm having fun learning the algorithm and getting up on the wave of all the different trends. But long-winded, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow if possible, tell your friends, share it on LinkedIn, all that stuff. I won't take it too much further. Today, we're going to be talking about kind of the 30-day adoption journey that Holly and myself have been on with Copilot. And we're going to be talking about the good, where Copilot is really beneficial. The bad, not necessarily the bad, but maybe the douse a little bit of cold water on it conversation, where the expectations of what we saw in demos just aren't hitting the same way. And kind of the ugly, which is going to be, as we talked about at the end of last year, the hot takes part of the podcast, where we're actually going to kind of share our own insightful thoughts on what we expected, what we got, and how, these demos got really fluffed up and it's not quite there yet. So we're going to dig into all that stuff throughout the podcast. We're going to try and keep this one at about 60 minutes. There'll be some layered in footage as we talk. So for those of you that watch on the YouTube feed, you'll get a better idea. And again, we've got kind of that tech tip series going over on the YouTube channel. So last week, Monday, I put one out on Copilot for Outlook. You can probably expect within the next week or so, there will be one going up on the next piece in the Copilot ecosystem for the productivity app. So I'd like to do one on Teams. We do not have a sandbox environment for any of this stuff yet. We were just talking about that on the pre-show. So it kind of stinks when I want to, show off the power of it, but I also don't want to dox my company. And any sensitive information.
Any of us want to put our personal screens up.
So I'll be playing around with some ideas on how we can do that and trying to get more out there. Likely, I think that the next tech tip one is probably going to be a Microsoft Word one for how you can create a document from scratch, or how you can use another document to help create another document faster, which seems to be a pretty common use case with it.
I think one of the things I would love to convey to the listeners is, these are not all varnished takes on this. We work with customers every day. We're using these tools ourselves, and we'll tell you what we think. I know as a vendor, working with lots of customers, we can't all be sold these tools just on the demos alone. We need to know how they get practically used, and that's what we're here to do today. So I was sort of thinking, alternatively, you could think of this as sort of like the good, the reality, and the ugly, because I think that's sort of one of the things, like you said, the getting doused with cold water is, we know what in some cases we thought we were getting, but now that we have our hands on these tools, I think we all know the truth and the reality of some of them. And, our goal is to help customers that are curious about using these tools know what that journey looks like. So we'll, I think if we do the 30-day adoption journey and, hopefully Microsoft continues to improve and roll out these tools and get feedback from customers like us, but at the same time, we'll continue to check back in with you, because I would even say the most recent updates for Copilot, even just, post-release, is like, all right, they're listening, they're cooking, they're making improvements.
Yeah, in the last 30 days, I've definitely seen it get quite a bit better than just the first week that I had it. Like, it has gotten better, it has gotten more responsive. Right. I will tell you, so I recorded that Outlook video for the YouTube channel at the beginning of February, and I had every intention of getting that out there before I left for vacation. Copilot had so many issues with me recording it. I don't know if it knew that I was recording it or what was going on, but like, I would click buttons and it just would not be responsive, or I would click summarize or draft an email and it would just spin. That stuff has seemingly gone away, or I'm just not doing it at the right time of day to interact with that. But we'd love to hear your stories as well. If you're experiencing some of that stuff, always feel free to reach out at letstalk@virteva.com, and we can listen to those and help you through your journey. I like your take on the good, the reality, and the ugly. I think something to include as part of that reality conversation is a lot of businesses, a lot of folks out there right now that are thinking about AI or hearing about it all the time. They don't necessarily understand that there's a level 1, a level 2, and a level 3 to the AI conversation. Level 1 is very much kind of like that early adoption, generative look at like productivity software. Level 2 would, to me, be, this is where we're actually using Copilot to automate and build tasks and workflow. So think about like Copilot Studio. And then level 3 is that's the kind of the dread conversation that a lot of people are worried about with AI, is like, how is it going to replace my job? Are they just going to automate me out of work? The journey from level 1 to 3 is a huge leap. It's not a simple thing. There's a lot of work that's going to go on the back end, and there's going to need to be developmental resources that understand how to build and program AI. The Copilot piece, the level 1, the introductory piece, is going to make everyone's jobs easier. It's when you actually sit the right people down. And I was hearing something recently about this on another podcast that I was listening to, is that I think that what you're going to end up finding with AI is there's going to be a lot of companies out there that are just like, oh, well, we've got AI now. I think IBM was an example of this last year, is they laid off like 300 people in like a customer service division because they were just going to automate it all. Well, the reality of the situation is AI is not that far along in a lot of cases yet to be able to do that. So I think that in a year or 2 years from now, you're going to see kind of like this surge of like, oh, we let all these people go because of AI. And then they're going to realize, oh, well, whoopsie doozy, we need to hire some of these people back. Or the flip side of it is that you're going to see a lot of kind of like programmers or engineers get laid off because of AI, but then there's not going to be anyone there to actually fix the problems that AI doesn't know how to solve. And then you're going to see a large amount of those people need to get hired back. And those people, if they're smart, will have adjusted their rates accordingly when they go to come back, because they know that there will be a bucket of problems waiting for them.
I think one thing that we could do for the YouTube side is maybe have a rating like the take my job-o-meter. Like, it's low, we're not at, take job take-o-meter. Like, we're not there.
Yep.
So I think there's the pace at which these conversations start to crop up more and more and more, I think is going to be accelerated just by the, how amazing this technology is. But I would say for anyone who's worried about that right now, just use Copilot, in your day-to-day, and you'll see, like, I'm safe. I'm safe. This is truly just making me more efficient at the work that I need to do. But at the same time, like, I don't want anyone to look at these tools as like, a horseman of the apocalypse right now. It's not there. The technology is simply not there. So I look at it as, take that productivity boost where you can get it, incorporate the build habits around the use of generative AI, whether it's in or out of Microsoft Office, but it's really like be someone who knows how to use these tools, be familiar with these tools.
Yep.
But the take my job-o-meter is, it's low. We haven't achieved critical mass.
Yeah, and if you're an organization out there, you work for an organization that's looking to develop an AI strategy, or you're looking to prioritize getting Copilot in front of your employees, but you don't necessarily know how to do that or the best way to do it yet, that's Virteva. We can help with that for sure. Is we have our own internal practice on that. We're already advising companies on how to use it, how to roll it out, and how to train your employees, which again, that's one of the most important parts. Is just like moving from on-premises to cloud, is you need to train your employees about the changes of where they're saving files, where they're putting their links, what the permissions look like on that stuff. And then we did a whole episode on this, is how to actually prompt the tool. You're not Google searching anymore. You're having a conversation with Copilot to get the best results.
Right. And as far as the training goes, we're going to talk about this today in some of that, but yeah, the reality of rolling this out in your environment is it's as good as you give it. We talked about pre-show, garbage in, garbage out with Copilot. It's really true. So if your foundation in Microsoft 365 is really structurally sound, this is going to be a great addition. If you want to use it and you're committed to using it, it will expose some issues with that foundation pretty quickly. So you might not just be learning how to use Copilot, but some of our training and project work might be, how do we remediate our environment to be more conducive to this tool? So like I said, it's good and bad, but it can definitely expose the cracks in your Microsoft 365 foundation. And that's what we'll talk about today, and kind of across these various apps.
Yep. If you turned off Delve years ago because you had someone go, "Why can I see all this?" The crack is now it's now there. It's exposed. Anyone can see it if they type the right thing. We've had examples internally about using. So I think it's just called Copilot Chat now. They called it Business Chat for a while, but the one that's in Teams, where there's two different versions of it. One that's an actual icon, and one was actually a chat conversation that's being deprecated. But you ask that certain questions if you already have it, and you'd be surprised sometimes what comes back. We had a business case scenario earlier this week where we were trying to find some examples of, so Virteva, we are partnered with CrossFuse, which does a lot of ServiceNow work. We were trying to find examples of statements of work for CrossFuse Extend, which is a new kind of a managed service that helps organizations not necessarily maintain, but kind of balance their internal ServiceNow work versus what's kind of pushed out to third party to us that we help with. And we were looking for statements of work, and I asked it, "Hey, can you find me information on CrossFuse Extend?" And it just started piling up like statements of work and presentation documents, which is great because I do have access to that and I should be able to see it. But on the flip side, if there's employees in the organization that shouldn't see it and they asked it, it just finds it. And that was, again, the scary part of Delve, is Delve just put it right in your face. So, you just closed the shutters and you couldn't see it anymore. Copilot, you can't as easily close the shutters anymore. There are ways to go in and train it not to look in certain areas. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't be trying to obfuscate that stuff. Instead, what you should be trying to do is actually get the right permissions and Teams and SharePoint management in place to make sure that if you're not supposed to have access to it, you shouldn't have access to it.
Yeah, I think that, honestly, the conversation, I know we're just diving right in, but the conversation around not just permissions, but location as well. I've worked with plenty of organizations where they're good about storing things online, voracious OneDrive users, but not so great at putting things in the team or SharePoint site where it needs to go. And remember, OneDrive is just, its default permission is to you. So then if someone is asking about work that's teamwork, but it's all stored in someone's OneDrive. Copilot can't talk to that data on their behalf, right? So if Scott stored all the statements of work in his OneDrive and we're able to survive as an organization, we know that Scott has those and we're used to asking Scott for those things, but then later on we have Copilot and I'm like, tell me about these customer statements of work. Well, if they're all in Scott's OneDrive, by default, I don't have access to that. So Copilot is only gonna, it's just like Microsoft Search, same thing. You see contextual results and that's kind of like one of the cracks in the foundation. Not just like what you said, Scott, around permissions, that is it's in the same ballpark, but it's a conversation around there's permissions, there's storage locations, there's all of those things that if you, like you said, you turned off Delve, you didn't want to look at that, you didn't want to see it, but now you want to use Copilot, you do have to address some of these concerns head on.
Semantic index.
I know. It's the same thing. I think as good stewards of any environment.
It's a fancy way of saying we've made some improvements to search in the Microsoft Graph, and now Copilot.
Yes.
Copilot is tuned into that, so it's just stuff to be aware of.
So we want people to know those things because it's really easy for us to be like, yeah, get Copilot, you'll love it. Not every environment is in the same shape as another.
Yep. So let's dip into the next area of the show here, because again, we're trying to keep it a little bit on the shorter side today. Yep. So I want to let's talk about the good. Let's talk about where have you used Copilot and where has it helped you be the most effective and kind of saved you time in your day? So Holly, I'll let you start.
So there's a couple of things that I have used Copilot for. So I tend to use Copilot Chat probably the most out of any tool, simply because I'm a content generator. So I work on the training and adoption side. And one of the things I help customers do all the time is write communications to their team. And I would say after 10 years, I'm pretty good at writing an email as it relates to end user impacts in a project, things like that. Okay. But I've started using Copilot Chat. I'll take my content and I'll say, make this shorter. Make this shorter at a 8th grade reading level. Take this paragraph and turn it into 5 bullets of no more than 4 words each, and you just can keep telling it and crafting not only what your goal is with your content, who it's for. So I tend to use it the most to help me become a better writer for my audiences. Now in Word, I've definitely used it to say, take this document and create an executive summary for me. Man, I have to tell you, it does such a good job with stuff like that I am actually feeling a little bit of like grief over like all the time I've wasted in the past, like writing executive summaries or having a customer come back to me and say, that's a great email, but I need it to be way shorter.
Yeah.
It's that boost that I'm getting out of using a tool like this. And what it does is it doesn't just like, hey, it helps me be a better writer. I feel like I learn from its outputs just as much as I do kind of like learn doing it. But it really has opened my eyes into how much time I spend doing a task like turn this into 5 bullets for a PowerPoint slide. Now, I can do that. Let's just all be honest. Mm-hmm. I can do that. I can work. But if I take something that would take me 30 minutes down to 1 minute, I can get so much more done. And I know that we're all sort of like need to be titans of industry, especially on the consulting side. But it's just mind blowing. I love it. I have worked that into my day to day. And
it's interesting to hear that you use it less for search and kind of getting answers than you do more kind of like a Quillbot or like a Grammarly replacement. Like, because it can do those things. And at the heart of those tools, because I've used Quillbot for years, is it's really good at shortening stuff up or formalizing, or if you're trying to, if you're taking an article and you're trying to avoid plagiarism, but you want to convey the same context, like it can do those same things, and Copilot can also do that, which is very nice.
Well, I mean, this is kind of one of those things is as a content generator, there's a part of me that's like, I really should be doing some of this myself. So I think I'm always trying to be mindful of like original IP and saying like, I'm still in control and Copilot is my Copilot helping me with my existing content. But I've definitely had conversations with it. Writing for certain types of audiences is something that can be really challenging. So I leverage it all the time to say like, hey, I want a document, a paragraph, an email written for this type of audience member. I mean, that alone, that insight that I get from it, it's such a game changer for me.
Awesome. So I'll give my example of the good. So as I mentioned, I think in the pre-show and a little bit at the beginning of the show, is I was on vacation, which delayed this podcast to the end of February. I went down there and spent the week with my wife and my sister-in-law and our nephew. We went to Disney. And I came back after about 7 to 8 days on vacation, and I had a lot of email. There's a lot of projects going on. We're kicking off a new major managed service customer. We're also working on a bunch of assessments on the advisory side of the house. And then I came back and I needed to prepare for that QBR. So I needed to basically get caught up real fast. And the way that I used Copilot when I got back was I had it summarize all my emails. Now, downside of this, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the reality, is that I can only summarize individual threads. I cannot just say summarize everything that came into my inbox from this date to this date. That is coming from what I understand, but it did help me summarize those emails. The real game changer for me was we record almost all of our meetings internally now, especially when they're customer meetings, and you need to do that for Copilot to get the transcription, which again is something that's going to be starting to change a little bit here in the coming weeks and months. But because we record all those and there's a transcript, is I can go into Copilot and basically just open up OneNote, create a new page, and then go into Copilot and say, hey, summarize or recap the meeting for me. And then I can basically grab the recaps and I can just drop them into OneNote, and then I can catch up and understand what was going on in those meetings and have a record of it just in one spot. The one piece that is interesting to me, so I've been a Teams Premium subscriber since early access last year. And Intelligent Recap spits out the recap part of the meeting. Copilot is a separate tab that you have to click into and then tell it to recap. And the outputs are different. So the meeting recap, I feel like, is more thorough, but sometimes is a little bit more janky, I guess is the word for it, is it doesn't always get everything right. But it does highlight, hey, suggested tasks at the end. Copilot doesn't do that as well, but one of the things that it does do is it gives you footnote links where you can click on a link and it'll take you to that part in the timeline of the recorded meeting, which can be helpful. So if your name gets called out or someone joins late or I join late, it gives me a better idea. So again, I think that I need to better understand what the difference between those two things are. And at some point, especially now with Copilot now being including the intelligent recap piece, do those two just eventually merge together and we only have one of those spit out? But yeah, that was the super, super good for me. Just to add on, talking about Copilot chat, one of the areas where I have found it super helpful, and I've been doing this even before we had 365 Copilot, is I maintain a lot of advisory kind of like slide deck content for the different Microsoft services. And one of the areas where I find it super helpful is if you're trying to read through a 10-minute read article, or you're looking at a lot of heavy stuff on Microsoft Learn, is in Edge, you can go to that kind of like sidebar and say, summarize this article into bullet points for me, and then it'll summarize it. And they're not going to be perfect, but a lot of times I will take those bullet points and put them into the slide and then just trim them up, add some images and some hyperlinks to it. And a lot of times that's good enough because the content that it's referencing, it's not like going out to the internet and asking it to just find you all this wild information, is you're specifically putting it in context of what you're looking at. and then it gives you the information you need. And again, I would recommend still skimming through that information to verify that those bullets are right, but it does a pretty darn good job of it.
Yeah, I think I would add in that sort of, co-browsing with Copilot. That's definitely a tool I've used in Edge. I would say the meeting recap and meeting summary thing, for me has been helpful. But again, I want to kind of take little pieces of what you're talking and say, for me, while those things are good, I think some of the realities of usage of some of those tools tend to, again, if I'm looking at it, not just for myself, right? I've definitely had wins with it, but holistically, when I think about my customer base, the people that I train on a regular basis, there's a lot of new habits to develop around the use of Copilot. Like you said, we basically record and transcribe all of our meetings now. And that's actually a really good habit to have going into using Copilot. But if it's not a habit of yours, you're again, until we have some updates, you're maybe back a step, right? Of really making it safe.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about the reality of the Copilot experience. So this is really the 30-day adopter's journey is you appreciate the good stuff, but then you feel like you kind of got the wool pulled over your eyes, or the pulled on you, or the tablecloth ripped out from under you. There's been some of those moments with it too. So I'll let you start with the reality, and then I'll kind of give my take on what I've seen.
So my reality list is, we're going to keep it short, but I'll kind of try and summarize the best I can. So big foundational crack stuff that we talked about, right? So putting Copilot in your environment can sometimes expose the cracks in your Microsoft 365 foundation. So where you store documents and the permissions for those documents, that is going to be probably one of the first hurdles if you want to use your company data to give you insight and answers back through Copilot. So if I have a huge document repository of legacy customers, but that's stored on premises, all that good stuff can't talk to Copilot. We can't say, comb through our archives and find all of the instances of, this type of statement of work or type of document. So wherever your data is going to be where, it's got to be in OneDrive. It's got to be in Microsoft 365.
Yeah. I mean, I think just adding on to that real quick, because I think that there has been a resistance for years on some folks moving everything to the cloud. This is that conversation is, if you want to start taking advantage of this generative AI stuff, you're going to have to do the migrations at this point.
Yeah.
And I imagine that a few years from now, there may be connectors that will talk to on-prem. Maybe not from Microsoft, but some of these generative AI companies will probably see that as something helpful. Like Apple's already talking about doing it on the phones potentially this year with NPUs.
Yeah.
It will just be, what type of hardware do you need to support it? Are you building out extra infrastructure? So probably the long short of it is, if you want to take advantage of it today, you need to start moving your data into the cloud. Right. So if you're a holdover and you've got people at your company asking for that, it's time to start making those moves.
Yeah, I mean, we have worked with customers that are like, we're not using OneDrive, it's not secure. We're not using SharePoint. And I think for a lot of times we weren't going to push it on people. We weren't going to say you better or else. We talk about the cons of not doing cloud file adoption, but this is now a big con, and that is say, hey, the promise of Copilot cannot be yours if you aren't willing to use SharePoint Online. And that's the rub. The other thing I think that, again, another big crack of exposure is permissions, not only at the container level, but at the document level. We've been, talking about these things as consultants for a long time, group-based permissions, making sure you have the right people in the right groups, access to the right things, avoid fine-grained, document level permissions, stuff like that. it only leads to heartache. I think Copilot exposes that. So, right, if you go into Microsoft Search today and you search for a keyword, if you see stuff that you think, why can I see this? It's because somewhere down the line, you are in a security group or a group that has access to a place that where documents is stored.
Or someone
you might
misshared
not,
something. Someone
yeah,
misshared
right. So
something.
it's like but all of the things that you do are contextual. So if you see something, it maybe doesn't mean that everyone can see it, but it definitely means that you're seeing it in your search results because you have permission to it. And if you have permission to something, Copilot could go out and use that content to generate, answers for you.
Yep.
So that's kind of where you want to kind of make some fixes or do some auditing. I would even say at the DLP level, understanding the data in your environment that is confidential, that's, eyes only stuff versus, anyone can see this. That can help too to train Copilot. Again, I don't know as much about, how that all works behind the scenes, but I will say that DLP has been available for a while, but whether or not we label documents,
I think a lot
whether or
of
not we have
companies,
auto labeling,
yeah, I think a lot of
deal.
companies see the value to labeling documents, but oftentimes what they do is they put those labels in place in kind of like an audit only or a like, yeah, like let us know if something happens, but don't warn the user or force them to apply a label. And I
Yeah,
think that as more and more generative AI gets out into the market, you're going to start to see more and more
right,
customers interested in actually
right.
either doing auto labeling through like an E5 security
Yep,
security and mobility license or something similar to that with other products. So, I
right.
mean, Google's doing their own thing. We just saw that, what was the name of the company? Microsoft just partnered with this morning, I think it was.
I haven't seen it.
They announced that they partnered with Mistral AI that is also doing generative AI, but I think that they're doing that more
Right,
on the Azure side of the house.
right,
I'll put some magic on the screen here so that you
right.
can see that.
Well,
Maybe audio dub that in.
I mean, I would even say just general things like I'm going to be working with some groups just talking about, again, good document security, document access type of stuff because it's part of these big underpinnings. Again, we know it happens that someone in maybe your customer service environment has a document full of passwords, something like that, right? We don't want Copilot to go out and have that stuff held in its index and be able to be used in a responsive way. So if you say someone goes out and says summarize the key points in this document and that document contains confidential information, we want to be able to say like no, this document isn't for that. So we want to find ways to sort of train Copilot to use the right things, but it definitely exposes that stuff. So those are the big things. And then there's the little things like you and I have talked about. Things where there's a lot of magic promised to you, but it depends on if your documents are set up the right way. And the example that I'm going to use is Excel. So we all use Excel. We use it. We abuse it. We've got habits upon habits stacked up around how we use Excel. And Copilot assumes that everyone uses Excel in the most, like the best way possible. That every time you have a full spreadsheet full of data, that it's formatted as a table,
Yep.
That it's a certain size, whatever. And not everyone formats what they do in Excel as a table.
I'm just going to take my glasses
maybe
off.
shocking for some of our listeners and viewers to hear, but it doesn't. And guess what? Copilot just can't really do much with it. So it's, one of the things that I would advise people to dig into, and I kind of have it up here, like the Copilot, there are some documents out there on support.microsoft.com that talk about frequently asked questions about Copilot in like Excel,
Yep.
in Word, whatever. And that might be something you throw up on the screen too, Scott. But basically it's sort of like, there's one, hey, why is my Copilot button in the ribbon grayed out or inactive? It's like, well, you can only use it with modern Excel files.
Yep.
The file has to be saved in OneDrive or Microsoft 365. You have to have autosave turned on, et cetera, et cetera. So if you get into these tools and it's a little underwhelming, or it feels like it doesn't work in the right way, it could be because there's a requirement out there that Microsoft is sort of needs in order to guide Copilot that maybe not a lot of us use. So again, tables, maybe I'm 50-50, you know. I think most of the time I try to use a table, but at the same time, not everything is formatted as a table in my world. So Copilot may have some limitations there. So again, that's my rant about the reality of Copilot in Office. I'll let you go. I'll let you have a turn,
I was
Scott.
just going to say, like, so for our video listeners, if you watch me take my glasses off and just rest my face in my hands, is I have seen so many Excel documents that should have not actually used Excel to put them together because it had nothing to do with actually using the power to like summarize that data or provide analytics on it. It's just, oh, well, this is a list now because there's little cell boxes. Like, same thing with kind of like the olden days of SharePoint on-prem is there are many different ways that you can use that. You could build intranet sites with it even then. And a lot of what it always just turned into was, oh, so I have a SharePoint site now. All right, well, I'm going to start dropping a million folders inside of folders inside of folders. And this is now a file server. And that was never the way that it was intended to be used. I've given this anecdote many times internally with our own teams. I don't know if I've talked about it on the show, but 15, 20 years ago, when I was starting to think about getting involved with IT, I really liked SharePoint. And I thought about going down that road. And what talked me out of it was watching other people use SharePoint and just never listening to the admins about how they should actually structure their content and their workflows, and just everybody dumping stuff into a folder. And that kind of backed me away from it. I went into system administration for other applications, and then eventually kind of went down like the leadership and the delivery and advisory path that I'm on today. All right.
Well,
so
that's
the reality.
Yeah, I think that is like, we all know the dream of SharePoint, but I know, and you know, and I want to say a lot of our listeners and viewers know how people, like what we're actually doing.
Yep.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm saying too about Copilot.
Yep. So my reality. So I think that we talked in pretty good detail about proper permission sharing and putting things in the right places and making sure that you're setting that up. We talked about labeling. So I think my reality, and this is going to kind of continue into the uglier part of the conversation, is just what the demos showed us versus what's actually capable. So you talked about Excel. I'll talk about Word a little bit, whereas I think that, so when you open up Microsoft Word and you have a Copilot license, you're presented with a box in the center of the screen that basically allows you to start typing or start saying, hey, this is what I want you to do. And I don't think that that's super clear. I think that when I start typing in that box or even invoking from the ribbon bar, is that a lot of times I'm expecting that I'm going to write something there and then I'm going to have Copilot similar to Outlook just redraft that for me. But you can do a little bit more there. The reality of the situation is, at least in my early experiences with it, and Chris Strong could back me up on this because we had the same problem, is I would give it a simple prompt and I would tell it to generate, and then it would just spin, and then error out on me. I think that has gotten better over the last 30 days. I've asked it to, you can kind of invoke the / to call out to a file, and it hasn't been able to actually find the file, even though I have permissions or I put the file somewhere.
Yeah.
But then 20 minutes later, it can find the file. Like that has been a struggle. And then just kind of getting back to the demo context is, I think Microsoft makes it kind of look glammy and ritzy with, oh yeah, you just tell it to reference this file and it'll build you this beautiful document. Well, if you don't put any formatting into that previous document, it doesn't know how you want it formatted, and it'll maybe take some best effort stabs at it. But in a lot of cases, what you're going to get out of it is not what you saw happen in the demo. So like if you're saying, hey, I built a statement of work over here, I need you to repurpose that, and you built tables and headers and different document sections and paragraphs into it, it'll do a much better job of recreating that and just changing the name out for the customer if it knows what it's looking for and how to create it. But it's the garbage in, garbage out thing, is if you hand it a, illy conceived or poorly formatted document, you're going to get back a poorly formatted document. Now, on the flip side of that, I have gone in there before and I have asked it to, and I've even asked this with Copilot on the web, the former Bing Chat Enterprise, is, hey, build me an executive summary and a proposal, or not a proposal, build me an executive summary or build me a proposal or build me a project objective statement based on X file, or give it a long reference of things that you want to be included. And it can and will do that fairly well. I actually had it build me a very short proposal document a couple of weeks ago. And then again, you have to go and you have to fine tune and you have to get it to how you want, but it saves you time. So Microsoft's work index numbers, which, they're all just made up anyways. Like those numbers are something to me, and I understand what they're trying to accomplish with them is give them new executive leadership to say, hey, it saves time, or hey, this is what, like, one of the questions that always really jabs me on that is like, oh, we gave all these licenses to people and 80% of them said that they would not give them back. It's like, well, yeah, people don't like it when you take stuff away from them. Of course they're going to say that. Or I think that the one that is most kind of alarming to me is, and I thought that this number would be higher, is it Copilot. We reached out to several hundred organizations and asked how much time Copilot saved them on a monthly basis. And the answer is like 10 hours. And I was like, 10 hours? It's 40 hours in a week. There's 80 hours in a 2-week period. Like 10 hours doesn't seem like that much. So I'll be interested to see.
Use all that extra time, Scott, to put styles in their Word documents to make it work better.
Yeah. Or break the styles that I put in.
We continued to use styles for years. Yeah. And now the chickens are coming home to roost, Copilot style.
Yep. So yeah, I think that for me, that's kind of the reality, is it doesn't always do exactly what the demos kind of showed you it doing. And I think I'll lead into the ugly and then I'll kind of pass it over to you. So the ugly part is probably, again, the expectation versus the reality. And the ugliest part for me has been PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint very regularly, and what I have found works fairly well in PowerPoint is there are like 3 preset boxes in there. It's create a presentation from a file, and add a slide about. So those are kind of like the initial like baked in prompts that you get. When I have used those prompts, I have been fairly successful with getting a very kind of elementary based slide deck presentation or just information there. Now, when I go in and I try and have a conversation with Copilot, it's like, hey, you're a world-class designer at a graphics design company. I need you to build me a background image for my slide that makes it really pop and just come off the slide and grab people's attention. And I'm using this. This is one of Chris Strong's examples from last week, is when Chris put that example in, is it basically just created like this wavy, abstract blue background, and it slapped it on top of all of his information on the slide that was already there, and you couldn't see anything behind it because it didn't even fill the slide. It just was like a big rectangle in the middle. So it didn't even kind of like move it to the background or transparency it out or something like that. But like, those are the things that I feel like the demos showed us that, oh man, this is going to be so cool. You'll never know how to live without this again. But the reality of it is if I put that in and I'm just an everyday user and I don't understand that it's floating on top of all of my presentation text, I think that Copilot just ruined my presentation, right? I wouldn't necessarily know to just click and delete it. Maybe I try and do an undo, but it's just, this is, and I don't even know necessarily, so this is the hot takes or the cold takes section of the show. I don't know if that stuff's ready yet. I think that the basic functionality is there, but I think that what we were kind of promised through those glitzy demos is that that's just not ready yet. And you could say the same thing to a degree about Excel. There's been articles that have come out in different business journals that I've been reading about people
Yeah.
having kind of those early adopter woes with it, especially because with this, you have to pay an annual adoption cost for it. Like Microsoft has said that it is $30 per user per month. And then like super, super small print or not there at all, you have to buy an annual subscription. So you're talking about
Yeah, you have to
$360.
pay 1 year up front
Yep.
or 3 years up front. I guess that's like one of the things, you know, if we were saying the cracks that it exposes in your Microsoft 365 environment, one thing that I would say is Microsoft 365 aside, what I feel I've learned from working with pilot users of Copilot, myself, whatever, is we all use these tools every day. We all use Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, some, you know, more than others. We all use them every day. But honestly, I feel like what it's taught me is we're all kind of bad. Like we're all kind of bad at using PowerPoint. We're all kind of bad at using Excel. And if we all used Excel the way a Microsoft like MVP knows how to use Excel, Copilot would do amazing things for us. But that's what I feel like I've taken away in the feedback is like, oh my gosh, I feel like, you know, I've been training people on all these newfangled things you can do in Microsoft 365. There's part of me that thinks like, I need to go back and like teach people some fundamentals of using some of these Office apps and stop letting them ignore them. Because we all know like,
and I would say that
PowerPoint is sometimes even an outlier. I would say like, PowerPoint is hard to be great at using PowerPoint. But at the same time, I think of Word, like Word styles. They've been around forever. They make your document life so much more easy. But guess what? You can 100% get away with never using styles and only doing direct formatting and fussing around with your document. Like you can. And you can get by for years and years and years and years. And now Copilot's on the scene and it's like, I can't turn this document into a PowerPoint presentation because I don't know what your document headings are. Because we haven't like used styles.
And I mean,
it's like mean.
I would say that that's probably a widely a wide enough thing that most people that have been using these applications for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, Microsoft's they're turning 50 this year, I think, or they're very close to it, is most people, like they say, like what, we only use like a certain percentage of our brains. Like what is like 50% or it's even probably smaller than that.
Like 10% of our brains,
we only use 10% of our brains. I would say that most users that are using the Office applications aren't even using 50% of the power in those applications. Word, Outlook probably gets touched more, but there's so many features in these applications that can go so much higher, further, faster that we're just like, well, I just need to write stuff down. Like, I can't tell you, like my Excel example of, you could have did that in a list. You could have did that in a Word document. But people just see the little cell highlights and like, oh yeah, I'll do that and like color it in a little bit. And yeah, it looks pretty now. But that's not the purpose of the program. Like I would say that a large percentage of people out there that use Excel on not a daily basis, but they use it a couple of times a week, they're not even tapping into 90% of what Excel can do. I mean, I've seen people build video games in Excel, and that is well beyond. And same thing with Word and PowerPoint. Like PowerPoint's probably very similar to Excel, as people probably only use about 20% of the power in PowerPoint when there's so much more stuff you can do. Like the morph transitions that they added in within the last few years, those are beautiful if you know how to make them work. But like you can't hand an executive a presentation that you built with morph presentations, because they're going to see all these duplicative slides of like the morph transition referencing like a full screen image. And it doesn't flow the way that it needs to, but it looks great when you're presenting it.
Well, but that's the thing, is it's just sort of like we're those habits we've accumulated over the years. This is truly like all of those chickens coming home to roost. How about, like I said, with Teams, people who don't use transcription or record it, right? Already you've sort of lopped Copilot off at the knees in some ways, because you can't say, come back after 2 weeks on vacation or whatever and say, summarize this meeting for me. You know, those types of things. I think it just like you're going to learn it hopefully from us the easy way, maybe hearing our conversation. But I think there's a lot of groups out there that are sort of like learning the hard way because, again, we had what you said, slick demos, the promise, of what's over the rainbow, and our own environment. Like the call is coming from inside the house.
Yep.
Our own bad habits and our own environment tangles are going to make this tool great.
It's going to make
or
us
not so
better
great.
whether we're using it or not, because it's going to start to train us to do things the way that we probably should have been
Right,
doing them for
exactly.
years.
I would even say like Editor in Word, again, an AI-powered tool, pretty great. Been around long before Copilot. I've used Editor now for a few years since it's been around. And I genuinely think after repetitive use of Editor, I've become a little bit better writer.
Yep.
Like I catch the mistakes before I make them, the style mistakes.
You're paying
So
for
I-
Grammarly.
I'm
You don't have to pay for Grammarly.
Yep.
It's already in
don't pay for
Microsoft Word.
Grammarly, everyone. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. But at the same time, it's just sort of like, yeah, it took being hit over the head a few times with some of my stylistic mistakes through the use of Editor.
Yep.
That I was like, what if I didn't make that mistake in the first place? But at the same time, it's like Copilot, the few first like mishaps you have with it, you're going to be like, well, I guess I'll just have to start using styles in Word. I'm going to have to start making sure that my documents are table formatted in Excel. Those are good habits to have. They're good things to do. So I think maybe Copilot, while it is ugly because it means it's kind of a hill to climb, it's going to make you better Office users,
Yep.
which is like, could be good. It could be good for everyone to be better at using Office.
Yeah. And again, like, I don't want to feel like we're in the hot takes, cold takes section here. We're not dumping too much cold water on this. I think that it's going to take some time to fully cook. Unfortunately, I feel like the reality of the situation is if you have Copilot right now or Copilot Pro, you are paying to beta test and experience right now to be an early adopter. But the tool is just going to continue to get better as time goes on. And as you do things in there too, Microsoft's very good about leaving feedback prompts, the thumbs up, the thumbs down.
Yes. Use that.
Make sure you're using that and explaining where you ran into problems, because that's how these things will get ironed out over time.
Right. And if you're a pilot user, make sure that you think about the culture of Office use in your organization. If you think you love Copilot and you want it to work for you, think about from a training and adoption perspective. Like, we could really use Copilot, but in order for us to get there, we have to become more educated users of, Teams, of Outlook, of Excel, PowerPoint. We have to include or give resources to that. And luckily, through Viva Learn, you have some of those resources probably right at your fingertips. So these are kind of those important things. And certainly we don't want to completely douse it with cold water and say, walk away. It's a good thing. It really is a good thing. I think Scott and I both have long lists of wins, the good, like it can be good. I think even in the reality, you can see the vision for how it can be great. But we also know, just by nature of working with lots of customers, lots of real people, hopefully, that are listening and watching, that you can go and watch a slick demo, but I want to make sure that everyone understands like what the adoption journey is going to look like.
There's definitely more good than there is bad and ugly with Copilot right now. I mean, the ugly is certainly ugly, but I mean, you can work around it. The reality of the situation
is going to change it.
Yeah, the reality of the situation is the good, like Outlook and Teams, are phenomenal. Like, those are, if you have the license, take advantage of that stuff right now, because that's the best it is right now, and it's only going to get better. The reality conversations around Word and Excel and PowerPoint, and even we didn't spend a lot of time talking about Designer, but the Designer piece that got featured at the Super Bowl, Designer is leagues better than it was
Yes.
like 8 to 12 months ago. Like, we played around with the Funko Pops at the end of the year, and I thought that stuff was pretty cool. But now the stuff that you can do with Designer is even more powerful because you can actually click on certain parts of the image. You can remove backgrounds easier. Like, it's not just, hey, do this. All right, well, that looks kind of cool. Now do it all over again, but slightly different. Now you can really get in there and fine tune. So Designer's powerful. That is a feature that I don't know if it's baked into the PowerPoint piece yet. I haven't tried to do a lot of image creation in it yet, but that was one of the demo promises. So I would expect that will eventually find its way in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the other kind of parting thought to leave with, if you're someone in IT, if you're a leader who is listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, where do I even begin? And, I know what the culture of office use is for us. I know that we're maybe not as far along in that adoption journey of SharePoint Online and OneDrive as we need to be to make this magic. But I see the promise. How do we get there? Like Scott mentioned, we have a practice around the use of these tools, and we have an existing practice around training and adoption that, we're ready to help you come in, and specifically around DLP, permissions, things like that. We have the administrative chops to help you get your arms around where your environment is as well. So on every front, we're ready to help you get to the dream, to get out of, where you're maybe stuck today and move forward.
Yeah. From our side of the house, and probably a lot of other organizations are doing similar pieces, is it starts with kind of like a pre-assessment of, hey, tell us a little bit about your environment today.
Yep.
We then can provide some feedback on that. We will sit down with your team and we will do some productized demos and show you what these products can do. And then we'll sit down and we'll further look at your environment to help you right size and get your permissions and everything right on your side so that you can start stepping forward, having conversations with your users, introducing it and making sure that adoption is strong, even down to the point of, hey, maybe you want to pilot this first, or maybe you want to look at not necessarily role-based Copilot, but Copilot 365 for different roles within the organization. So like, I think, and this is my own personal thought, that the number one person that should have Copilot isn't necessarily an executive, it's a project manager. The amount of time that project managers spend trying to go back through a meeting and read through the transcription or rewatch the videos, that can save you so much time. We're doing it internally within our own practices, as I kind of highlighted through my vacation. And it is super, super helpful for project managers. And if you can get them out there advocating for how great it is, then you can start to expand it out. Not to say that executives and managers can't have it, but I think that right now, especially with the big bang for your buck feeling like it's Outlook and Teams right now, is those are the people that really, really benefit from those types of tools.
Right. Well, and I would say, I think, number one, probably project managers. Number two, any other type of content creator in your content creators in your environment. So if you have internal marketing and comms teams, that I will advocate for those folks like myself to say, not just say, press the easy button, but to increase capacity.
Yep.
I spend a lot. I'm collecting those, same as those people that say they've been saving 10 hours, I'm collecting that extra time as well. And I think that the quality, it doesn't dip on the quality of my output. I think I'm still in control, right? It's just my Copilot. It's not the pilot, but sometimes it really, like, I get a lot of insight from that tool, and that's something that I would say I wouldn't give that back right now. I would say, please don't make me go through life without this anymore, because man, it's so much faster to generate the same amount of content, even more content and ideas for content. I'm not just at the whiteboard all day long. It's so great. I love it. So find people that are content creators. And the thing that I also want to highlight, and maybe we didn't talk about from the good perspective, and I know we're leaving it towards the very end, and I mean, I would just want to say this on the good side. Copilot is secure. If you are concerned about the use of generative AI tools outside of your secure environment, meaning is someone pasting in our company data into these tools. So think of someone like me. If I didn't have a Copilot license, maybe I'm using some other third-party tool to do these things.
Yep.
And I'm pasting in the content of an entire document with proprietary information into, some black box where I don't really know where it goes or how it gets used after it generates content for me. It's in your environment. You own it. It's not leaving the premises. And that's something I want to make sure everyone understands as a huge proponent or a component of this tool is that it is secure to you, to your enterprise.
Another huge part of the content that we talk about in our workshop is exactly that, is making sure that people understand that they own the content. Microsoft doesn't feed their models with it, and that the information is safe. But at the same point, you may want to look at other tools out there like Geminis and Bards and try and prevent people from using those if you have Copilot internal, which again, every Microsoft 365 customer has some form of Copilot internally. They may not have 365 Copilot, but they have the actual Copilot commercial piece that's floating out there through the web and the Edge sidebar.
Yeah, secure that to your environment.
Yep.
Go for it. Do it. Make sure that people know and promote its use. So whether you have the full kind of enterprise license or you're just using that commercial tool, and make sure that you have that enabled, that your data is, that people are using their identities and that your data is not being saved.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 100% agree. So Holly, I wanted to again thank you for coming on the show again this week to talk kind of that 30-day Copilot adoption journey. I thought that it'd be really interesting to, instead of just focusing on the news and announcements that are happening on a regular basis, to actually sit down and kind of have a real conversation about it. If you are interested in learning more about Copilot or even the Copilot Pro experience and how to implement that and build a center of excellence within your own environment, please reach out to us at Virteva. We can certainly help with that. We have an internal workshop and advisory service built around that to help your org prepare. And you can reach out to us by emailing us at letstalk@virteva.com or by visiting our website at www.virteva.com. If you'd like even more Microsoft news that you haven't heard on this show today, because we really didn't talk about anything except for our experiences with Copilot, you can subscribe to our Microsoft newsletter that goes out on a monthly basis. You can do that by visiting our website. The newsletter recaps a handful of topics month to month to keep you in the loop and in the know about recent news and announcements. Spoilers, big thing coming next month, Microsoft Secure. So we'll probably be talking a little bit about that stuff and some of the announcements that came out of February. And then I expect that as we get to March, we'll probably be doing a podcast on Microsoft Secure and the announcements that came out of that. It's crazy that we kind of went through this lull of news for the past month and a half, and now Secure is next month. Microsoft Build is upcoming. Microsoft 365 conference is at the end of April. June usually slows down a little bit again, but I do believe in April, we're getting the new planners coming. Microsoft Backup have now gone into public preview. So there's a lot of news starting to come through the pipe, and we should be able to start talking more about that on the show and in the newsletter. So it is worth signing up for, especially if you don't want to sign up for a 60-minute engagement of listening to this entire newsletter. Though we are better, especially on YouTube, of actually adding chapters in now, so you kind of skip around.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, Holly, thanks for being on the show, and thanks to our listeners and our watchers for tuning into another episode of Virteva's Let's Talk podcast. If you made it this far, please don't forget to hit those like, subscribe, follow buttons, and share with your friends. Take it easy, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.